Right before we get into this real-world review, if you haven't signed up for the Fronos Photo email list, you can do so. Just look for this orange box over on the website, put your name, email address in it, hit send it, and I will send you a free guide to capturing motion in low-light situations. Jared Polin, FronosPhoto.com, and this is a real-world review of the Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter contemporary lens. So here we are today in Atlantic City to test out the Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter contemporary lens. Now this is an f5 to 6.3 lens, and we are here to shoot the Atlantic City Air Show. They like to call it Thunder over the boardwalk. So to give this the best real-world review possible that I can, I'm using two different bodies. We have the crop sensor 7D Mark II, as well as the full frame 5D Mark III. I wanted to give it the best possible results that I could, so we're gonna test it out on both and see how the results look. All right, is this good? Is this good? Hey, can you turn to the left a little? I need this reflection. Yeah, I'm getting the bounce back right here. That's good, it's lighting up my face real nice, yeah. Bright neon shirt's great for reflections. So Sigma makes two different versions of this lens. This is the contemporary version, which is a little more affordable than the sports version. The sports version, roughly $2,000. This one, $1,000. Now there are some subtle differences. This weighs about 2 pounds less than the sports version, but I thought that I wanted to test out the more affordable one right here in this real-world review. So generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of the histogram, but now that we're outside in a really bright day that I can't get a good representation of the photo that I'm taking on the back of the screen, I am looking at the histogram. I am looking for that spike right in the middle. That's what I'm looking for to make sure that my exposure is going to be as close as possible with the raw file, so after the fact, I can bring it to life in Lightroom. So let's talk about the weight of this lens. Will you use a monopod, a tripod, or just hand hold it? Now, well, I personally came out here not using a monopod or a tripod because I thought I could hand hold it, and I was able to. Now, being that it's about 4 pounds, a little over 4 pounds, it could get a little cumbersome over time, but it's not too heavy, and that's why the contemporary version, if you're looking for something that's lighter, could be a good option for you. Down in front, we got a 600 millimeter in front of me in the way. So one thing to keep in mind is that this is a variable aperture lens. What that means is at 150 millimeters, it's an f5. As you zoom, you're losing light. It's going down to f6.3. So one of the things that I'm doing out here today is shooting in manual and making sure that my aperture is at 6.3 or a little higher. I don't want it to be at f5 in case I zoom out and then it changes to 6.3. one of the important features you want to look for in a mega zoom lens like this is image stabilization. Now Sigma has their OS and they have two different versions of it in this lens. One is for just general shooting for it to stabilize your images, and the other is for when you are panning subjects, which is perfect for when I'm shooting planes flying by. So I'm pretty happy with the images I'm getting so far, at least here on the back of the screen. The lens is working very well. It's acquiring focus better than I thought it would. Now, if the Contemporary is getting focus as well as this one is, I would think that the Sport's gonna do just as good. But so far, pretty happy with everything that I'm seeing from using this lens. That challenge. The challenge of shooting prop blur and testing stuff at the same time. And trying to counterbalance the bright yellow shirt that right next to me. It's throwing off my exposure by a lot. So keep in mind, we're shooting in an extreme situation out here. The airplanes are flying at 500-600 miles per hour, and that is really pushing this lens to its limits. Now, so far, I think it's keeping up with it very well. Now, keep in mind, you're probably gonna be shooting kids running around playing sports or in the backyard. That's really what these lenses are meant to do. But if it handles this type of image very well, then it's definitely gonna handle the type of images you're looking for. One of the things I found awkward with this lens was how far I had to turn my hand when zooming. To go from 150 to 600, I almost have to turn my hand twice to get it all the way out there and back again. But that also creates some issue when I'm trying to track a subject where I'm going from 600 and then pulling back on the zoom. It's a little tight, and you also have to turn it pretty far, which makes you off axis, and it makes it harder to get the picture. So to make this the best real-world review possible that I can, I'm not using a filter on the end of this lens. But if you want to use a filter, keep in mind it's 95 millimeters. Those are going to be very expensive. If you're looking to get a 95 millimeter UV filter, pretty expensive, and even more expensive than that are going to be the circular polarizers. You know, when you put on neon yellow shirts, it gives you extra human strength to handhold a 600 on a 7D Mark II. That's 960 millimeters in his hands. He's used to that, though. You know, when you put on... So why does this lens have a lock switch on the side of it? Well, that's so that you can lock it in so it doesn't zoom if you're walking around, if you're putting it away, because what is happening, you can, by shaking it a little bit, it's going to start to creep just ever so slightly, and that's not something you want to have happen in your bag or when you're walking around. So keep in mind, when you're using this lens on a crop sensor, you have to multiply it by 1.6 if you're on the Canon and 1.5 on the Nikon. So that makes this a 240 millimeter to 960 millimeter equivalent lens. Now that is a huge range. So here's a quick tip. It's a hazy day. The plane has a lot of smoke coming out of the back of it for looks. And when you look at it at a distance, between the mix of the smoke and the haze, you shouldn't be shooting because it's just gonna come out in a cloud. So just save your frames and don't shoot when it's in a cloud of dust. So what's the difference between shooting it with a crop sensor versus a full frame sensor? I think it was much easier to acquire focus when you're using the full frame camera. Why? Because it's drawing from a larger area, whereas in the case where you're using a crop sensor, it's really not. But it still handled the focus very well, whether you use the crop sensor or the full frame, so I'm pretty happy with that. One thing I didn't focus on today getting was video with this lens. Now, would you use this for video? Can you use it for video? Absolutely. But if you're going to use it for video, you're gonna have to be on a tripod because the image stabilization isn't going to be able to keep up with the motion, especially out at the 600mm point. Talk about focus speed. I'm pretty happy with how well it focused. I was a little concerned that it would be sluggish because it's a third-party lens on the Canon body, but it worked very well on the 7D Mark II as well as the 5D Mark III. I think it was a little quicker on the 5D Mark III, and there was this time when I was shooting that I went from one plane and then it acquired another plane when I pointed at it and it jumped right to it. Now that is a sign of quick focus. So far, everything I've talked about is what it's like to use this lens and how it worked out here in the real world. But I can't tell you, is it the best lens yet? Because I haven't seen the images, and to do that, we have to send it back to the loft so I can look at them and then give you my final thoughts on if this is a good lens or not. Here we are back in the loft where I've had a chance to put the raw files onto the computer and go ahead and edit them in Lightroom because that is where this real world review comes to life. Now, I want to remind you that if you haven't checked out all the full res images, you can do that over on the site. Take a look at them, pixel peep all you want, but also download the raw files that I've given you so that you can zoom in 1:1, 3:1, pixel peep, and determine whether this lens is for you. But let's take a look at some of the images and give you some thoughts along the way. So this is a seagull. Of course, it's not an airplane, but there's a lot of seagulls flying around down the shore, and I was really happy with how sharp this was. The detail under the wings, the sharpness and separation of the seagull itself onto the background, which this is glass in the background, looks really good. Now, moving through some of these images, this is really what I want to talk about. This is a 600mm shot using the 5D Mark III. This is a full frame camera, and I am filling the frame edge to edge, not cropped at all. You can look at the raw file and see that for yourself, but this is an unbelievable image because it's at 600mm. We have to think about that. This lens, it gives you 150 to 600. Where are you going to get a reach like that unless you're using a 600mm f4, which runs you about $12,000? So what is very interesting about a lens like this is that I think in some cases it's better than that 600 f4. Now, it's not going to be as sharp as that or as fast focusing, but there's a big difference between $1,000 and $12,000, right? So what I like about the range of the 150 to 600 is that it allows me to get images that I wouldn't be able to get with a fixed focal length lens. For example, last year, shooting the air show, I used a 300 2.8, and I had to wait for the planes to come to me to fill the frame because I didn't want to crop. Well, in this case, I can go to the planes and then zoom back with them because the 150 to 600 gives me that range. Plus, taking a look at the shot, it's sharp. It is pretty colorful, but I did punch that up in the raw file because we got boned on the day. It was, as you could tell from the video, it was such a hazy day, but with the raw file, I'm able to bring that out. Now I can show you what it looked like before it was edited. This is what it looked like. And also, one of the things that I used was lens correction. Lightroom already has a lens correction built in here. You can see the vignette around it. But simply by clicking the Enable Lens Correction, bam, it gets rid of it. Now, it's good for some images. It didn't always work when I was using it, but it worked for this one, and this is one of the best shots that I have here. You can see the vignette on a shot like this. It's pretty strong after I brought the file back as best as I could. Let's keep moving here. This is one that I wanted to show you. This is a 600 millimeter shot with the 7D Mark II, meaning it's a 960 millimeter equivalent. We filled the frame. Nobody out there was getting this shot except for the guy next to me with a 600 millimeter f4. But he wasn't getting any of the wider shots because he couldn't zoom. So that's what this lens gave me. And as we go through here, this is an important picture to talk about. This is shot at 1/320th of a second, shot all the way out at 600 millimeters. So you can see the guy right here. And the reason I'm shooting at 1/320th is because I wanted to get the prop blur. But let's look at the settings real quick. 600 millimeters on the 7D Mark II is a 960 millimeter equivalent. Now the rule of thumb is that you don't want your shutter speed to be slower than your focal length. So in this case, theoretically, you don't want to shoot it slower than 1/1000th of a second. But I'm hand holding it 1/320th, which is breaking all the rules, which should be giving me some motion blur. But I used the OS2 on this lens, the second OS that it has for the optical stabilization. And to be able to hand hold it and to get this image as sharp as it is, zoomed all the way out and being a 960 millimeter equivalent is absolutely insane. That means that the OS is working extremely well, so that is a plus for this lens. All right, as we keep moving forward, filling the frame again, the focus is what I want to talk about next. I was able to rack through 15, 16, 20 shots in a row with the lens focus tracking. And of course, the body has something to do with that. The better body that you use, it's going to help in combination with the lens to get better focus tracking. But even on a 7D Mark II, this was a consumer camera, it was able to focus and track even while shooting at 10 frames a second to make sure that each picture was in focus. So the autofocus speed, really good. The autofocus capability of tracking to continually track, really good as well. So that's a bonus for this lens. And I want to show you this to zoom in on it. Look how sharp the Skywriter's guy's head is. You can see it right here. This is 500 millimeters. Again, with just about any lens on the market, you're not getting that reach unless you have a 150 to 600. This is just to give you an example of the bokeh in the background. I'm at f8 and I'm wider at 226 millimeters, and you can see that it's pretty prevalent in the background. You can see the boaters and everything, so that could become a distraction because it doesn't blow it out as much, whereas say a 600 millimeter f4 is going to compress the background even more and give you nicer bokeh, but it's that trade-off. $1,000 lens, $12,000 lens. You have to keep all of that in mind when you're shooting. The one last thing that I want to say is that 150 isn't always wide enough. So this is what ends up happening as you're trying to track the subject, is 150, you know, it's wider on a full frame, but then when you put it onto a 7D Mark II and you have that crop factor, well, you're not going to be able to fill the frame at 150 most of the time because you're going to cut a lot of stuff off. That's just what's happening here. All right, so the big question right now is, do I recommend it? Now, based off of the price point, $1,000, based off of everything that I've done in this real-world review, I can absolutely say that yes, I would recommend it. Now, I didn't think I would going into it because I'm not a big fan of super mega zooms like this, but now that I've used it in the real world, it gave me something that I may not have been able to get even with the more expensive lenses. Having the zoom options, like I said, from 150 to 600 gave me the ability to go out and touch the planes that I wouldn't have been able to touch any other way. The focus was spot on. The images are clean and sharp. They're not as sharp as a more expensive lens, but in the end, all that really matters is that I got the pictures. They're very, very usable. You can see that in the raw files yourself. So that is where I'm gonna leave it. I do recommend this. For $1,000, you can't go wrong putting this in your bag if you're shooting birds, if you're shooting nature, if you're shooting anything outdoors. Where I draw the line is if you're gonna try to use this indoors, it's not gonna give you what you want. But I do recommend this, and that is all I'm gonna say about this. And that is another real-world review, this time of the Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter contemporary version lens. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you haven't subscribed here on YouTube, please go ahead, hit the subscribe button so that you can get the latest videos as they go live. But if you're really interested in how to shoot an air show, how to set your camera, all of the mentality that goes into capturing images like I have done, well, I've done a 5-minute portrait out at Atlantic City at one of the air shows where you can click up on the screen right now to go ahead and check out that 5-minute portrait at an air show.